Well, the cost to build the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion has jumped 70% to $2.6 billion. Initial estimates 3 years ago pegged the cost at $7.4 billion. But design changes, such as adding thicker pipe and enhanced leak detection provisions, along with delays, have pushed costs up significantly. The delays include the 2018 Court of Appeal decision that struck down the approval of the project. I'm now joined by the Premier of Alberta, Jason Kenney. He joins me from Washington. Premier Kenney, great to have you here on the program.
Thanks, Angie. Good to be here.
Give me your thoughts on this number, the projected cost of the pipeline expansion jumping from $7.4 to $12.6 billion.
Well, that's I get a surprise, but the federal government took ownership of the pipeline because regulatory uncertainty caused the American company, Kinder Morgan, to leave Canada and leave us in the lurch. The pipeline has to proceed because ultimately it will be worth tens and tens of billions of dollars of government revenue. It will support thousands of jobs, and it will help us to stop effectively subsidizing the U.S. economy. Right now, we sell our oil at a big, the Americans get to set the price effectively because they're the only buyer of our energy. If we get TMX done, all of a sudden, the price of our greatest asset goes up. That's good for all Canadians. So this is unfortunate. It's still necessary we get this done. I guess I would say the moral of the story is we need regulatory certainty so that in the future, companies don't leave the country like Kinder Morgan did. And that's why I hope the federal cabinet will approve the Teck Resource Mine.
President and CEO Ian Anderson referred to the pipeline now as a different project. The expansion is a different project than from what it initially was. What are your thoughts on that? Do you see that as it is as a different project based on the needs?
Well, Ian would know the technical answer to that. All I can say is that as a project like this gets delayed, as it has been for years, inevitably the costs go up. That's why we need a straightforward and predictable regulatory process where decisions can get made and big projects can be built in a reasonable amount of time so that A, we don't end up losing companies leaving the country like Kinder Morgan, or B, taking a decade or longer to build a project which should normally take 2 or 3 years.
The argument presented is because, or the concern I should say presented is with this increase in cost, it's going to be an increase in cost to Canadians. Do you think, as you're presenting this, is this going to cause or create, thousands and thousands of jobs that's going to offset that?
Well, there's no doubt, as I say, that over the course of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, it will generate tens and tens of billions of dollars of value and revenue to the Canadian economy and revenues to Canadian governments, to the governments of British Columbia, of Canada, Alberta, and then we share that across the country through equalization and through our whole system of fiscal transfers. Alberta has contributed about $600 billion net to the rest of Canada since about 1960, primarily through our energy resources. We want to continue to share that, but we can't unless we get global market access, including through pipelines like the Trans Mountain expansion.
Talk to me a little bit more, Premier, about your visit in Washington, because you certainly are there for that selling point to say that Alberta is a place for investment.
Yeah, so I'm spreading the word about how we've reduced we are reducing the business tax rate by 1/3. We're speeding up the regulatory process. We're cutting unnecessary red tape by 1/3. Our goal is to be the fastest moving and freest economy in North America. The Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers recently predicted that we will, for the first time in 6 years, see an increase in capital investment in the Canadian energy sector of $2 billion that will create, I think they estimate, 8,500 new jobs. And we estimate the job creation tax cut will create 55,000 net full-time private sector jobs once fully implemented. But in particular, I'm down here talking about the importance of energy security. And we need to get those pipelines built. For example, Keystone XL, TransCanada Energy has given notice of its intention to begin building it this year under a presidential permit that was issued. And I'm here meeting with governors, senators, congresspeople, members of the U.S. administration to confirm their support for that project that will be worth tens of billions of dollars of value to Canadians.
And you're also going to be meeting sort of within that group, respective premiers, Ontario, Premier, Doug Ford, Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, Quebec Premier François Legault as well. What are those discussions are going to be about? Certainly, wanting to meet with Premier Legault with regards to his concerns on the pipeline.
Well, I think Premier Legault has no objection to the Trans Mountain or Keystone. He obviously is opposed to an oil pipeline going through Quebec, but he does support liquefied natural gas. He also supports us on our opposition to the federal No More Pipelines Law, Bill C-69, and on our objections about the carbon tax intruding in our jurisdiction. So we're actually getting along pretty well. We'll also be joined by New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs, and later this afternoon, the five of us will be meeting with United States Trade Representative, basically he's the Trade Minister or Secretary, Rob Lighthizer, to talk about the ratification of the revised NAFTA trade agreement, as well as other trade issues and irritants. We all know that there is a renewed protectionist attitude at both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, Congress and White House here in Washington. That's one of the reasons we're down here as Team Canada. We will be joined by Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland as well. And we'll also be attending meetings of the National Governors Association. I, in particular, will be meeting with governors in states where we're having opposition to pipelines that permit Canadian energy exports to the United States. About a third of Canada's exports to the U.S. come from Alberta. That's mainly energy. We want to continue that. That's good for all Canadians. I
want to switch gears a little bit, Premier Kenney, to looking at the Conservative Party, the federal Conservative Party. The situation it is in right now, looking for a new leader. You had publicly stated this morning, John Baird should be seriously considering a run. What are your thoughts? You know, Mr. Baird hasn't expressed any desires as far as we know. Rather, he was, of course, part of that report looking into the party post-election. But your thoughts on why you think John Baird should be the man?
Well, John's a good friend of mine. I did speak to him about this a couple of days ago, and I encouraged him to put his name forward. I think that Conservatives would benefit from a larger field, and John is a principled Conservative with deep experience, both at the provincial and federal levels, as well as in the private sector. John is bilingual, and he has great connections across the country and internationally. And I think we need candidates who are principled Conservatives who can win, who are bilingual, and who have relevant experience. And I think John, this is not an endorsement, but I sure hope he puts his name forward, because I think it would be good for the country and the party to have somebody of his caliber offering their talent and experience for leadership at an important time.
Where do you think the party needs to go? What needs to change here in order for it to get back on track?
Well, I wouldn't say it's completely off track. I mean, federal Conservatives had their best result as an opposition party ever, increased the number of seats, won the popular vote, went up in almost every region, did extraordinarily, had great candidates, raised a lot of funds.
But where does the focus need to be?
Yeah, I would say, you know, where the federal Conservatives lost was in Ontario, and they've got to work harder to regain the confidence of folks in Ontario, also, you know, Canadians have a tendency to re-elect governments. We saw a majority Liberal government turn into a minority. I just think what Canadians are probably looking for, what they would consider competent and safe change. But ultimately, that will be up to the Conservative members to decide what they're looking for. One thing I would advise my fellow Conservatives of is that we need to offer Canadians a choice and not an echo. The country doesn't need two Liberal parties. We need a party that believes in economic growth, fiscal responsibility, reducing the cost of living, responsible resource development, but also responsibility on the environment. I think people are looking for that balance. What
about yourself? Looking at your political background and experience that you've had, why not put your name in the ring?
Well, very simply because I was just hired by Albertans to do a very big job just 9 months ago, and I committed to them I would stick to this task, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to committed to keeping my word to Albertans, and I think I can play a certain role in some of the debates around national issues, but I hope that there will be a good field of candidates for Conservatives to choose from, and certainly won't include me.
All right, well, we'll have to leave it there. All right, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney, great chatting with you. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for the opportunity, Angie.